All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Clearing the Air Part 2. We're super excited to be here. I'm your host, Alex Hilliker. I am the Executive Vice President at ChemDAQ. For those of you that I haven't met, I see a lot of familiar names, which is awesome for this type of an event. On behalf of ChemDAQ and the ASSI teams, we're thrilled to be able to continue this series on AAMI ST58 with today's educator panel. I think as many of you know, and as we've discussed in Clearing the Air Part 1 last fall, AAMI ST58 was updated in late 2024. But let's face it, this standard often gets lost in the sauce, I like to say, with ST79, ST91, ST98. Our team at ChemDAQ and at ASSI with our partners, we're working to change that because this standard is just as important as the others. And the spirit of the recent changes to this particular standard really center around staff safety in so many ways. And this is a critical issue in today's sterile processing departments. Demands, pressure, throughput, expectations, those are all increasing. And the ChemDAQ and ASSI teams are committed to continuing to educate and raise awareness on this standard, as well as the safe and effective use of chemical sterilants and high-level disinfectants overall. So this leads to our esteemed panel this morning, which I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce. First off, you know him, you love him, you see him everywhere. He is the Executive Director of Surgical Services Strategy and Performance at ASSI, Mr. Jameed Billingsley. Welcome, Jameed.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. Great to be here. Great to be here with a real educator who's in the field so we can talk some ST58 stuff.
Well, we're super happy to have you, Jameed. And up next, our favorite clinical resource manager and president of the Keystone Alliance of Sterile Processing Professionals, Vanessa Frank. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize I was your favorite. Um, but yeah, I'm super excited to be here and talking about this. It's near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited to kick it off. And agreed, we've got Tia here living it in the day.
You know it.
Perfect transition. Last, certainly not least, she is a leading SPD educator and safety advocate. She is making her live event debut for Clearing the Air Part 2, live from her department. We are so happy and grateful to have her here. Tia Rouse. Tia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here for the opportunity to talk department stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Tia. And to the viewers, the participants, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. I know, we are just past a holiday weekend for some of us. This is an important discussion. I have no doubt that the next 40 minutes or so are going to be highly valuable for all of us. Before we jump into it, quick housekeeping here for the audience. We are recording this session, as you probably heard. We will make it available to all of you after the meeting. Of course, this course is approved for 1 CE through HSPA and CBSPD. We'll be following up with all of the attendees with your certificate after this event. Do us a favor, we're not perfect. If you don't see your certificate by the end of the week, just reach out to our team. We'll make sure that we get that to you. Lastly, this is going to be a great panel, but we are limited on time. There's only so much that you can pack into 45 minutes or so. I'm certain that we will not get to anything, or to everything, I should say. It is a long standard after all. If you have questions or areas that you want to talk about in more detail, please don't hesitate to reach out to this team. I think I can speak on behalf of Jimmy, Vanessa, and Tia that we're all incredibly passionate about these issues. This is just the beginning of the conversation, and we're all available and accessible to discuss with you and your departments should you wish to do so. Please reach out to us directly. So we do have a lot to cover. We're going to jump right into it. Our first question for this educator panel is for Jameed. Jameed, we're going to start with you. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start super high level. What is AAMI ST58 anyway? And why is it important for SPD leaders and technicians to be aware of?
That's a great question, Alex. Now, if you watched part one, you'd already know the answer, but that's okay. That's
We got
okay.
to catch people
That's
up, Jimmy.
So ST58 is the official standard for all high-level disinfectants, all chemical disinfectant, and new includes ethylene oxide, right?
Hmm.
Because that those are on the rise. And why it's important is because, as we with technology, we have started to use high-level disinfection and alternative methods, non-steam sterilization methods, a lot more. If you think about from a percentage, with some of the robotic things and all that stuff that has to go through the hydrogen peroxide, look at your percentages. Your percentage of those are rising. So ST58 is your guardrails. How do I do it right? Am I doing it correctly? And that's trademark Vanessa Frank. We start off and we're like, I think we should be doing it this way. And ST58 is your way to prove that you're doing it the right way. And as a bonus, ST58 is one of the elite standards that has been recognized by the FDA. What does that mean? That means when I'm getting ready to do an IFU, when I'm getting ready to submit a new product, if I conform to the methods in ST58, then it kind of fast tracks me for getting my 510K through the FDA. So it's an important document, and it's one that, as you pointed out, Alex, we're not always as knowledgeable about it. Like when people, what's the updates to the new one versus the old one?
Mm.
Well, we didn't know the old one that good, if we're honest, right? So this is our opportunity to really dig in and get to know this standard that can help us with guardrails and make sure that we're doing what we're saying we're doing the right way.
Yeah, well said, Jimmy. And I think that we'll get into some of those changes from the 2013 version in a little bit here. But anything that Vanessa or Tia you'd want to add about why you think this conversation is important? Not to put you on the spot and go off script so early, but this is a live panel after all. Why do you think this is important?
Well, for me, I think it's important in the department because we handle those kinds of chemicals. We handle that
Mm.
kind of product, and you want your staff to be aware, you want them to be informed, and you want them to be knowledgeable about what they're using so that they know how to properly do what it is that they need done. So I think that's probably one of the important things for me.
No, agreed. Kind of to piggyback off what you just said is we do handle these chemicals every day, and it gets kind of, a little blasé about it. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
you put the
Sure.
cup in, you take
Very
the cup,
true.
like, and you're just so
Yeah.
used to, especially when it goes well, you're so
Yeah,
used
Mm.
to that routine. And then if something doesn't go the way it's supposed to, you are like, oh crap, what do we do?
Mm.
Where do we
yeah,
turn to? So that's why
and
this,
that's the gap. Yeah,
yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's such a good point. When you're working around it all day, every day, and 99.9% of the time it's going the way that it should,
yeah.
that's great. And I jotted down and I put a little TM next to it for Vanessa Frank, the "Am I doing it right?" standard. That we might make that nickname
Put
stick.
that on a shirt.
That's right. Print the shirts.
Am I doing it right?
Um, so, Jameed, you talked a little bit about the changes, and Vanessa, I wanted to tee you up on this next question. Um, and you and I have talked about this personally. We've talked about this in previous events, but I think in the spirit of getting the audience on the same page as we get into the details in this conversation, can you walk us through some of those major changes that were made, and why our audience should consider those issues and what's been updated?
Sure. Yeah, I can hit a couple of those. Well, Jameed brought one up is ethylene oxide is now in
Mm.
this document instead of in its own document. So, um, whether, even if you have the machine, you still have to provide documentation, for said machine. And if you are referencing old standards, that's no longer applicable. You need to stay up to date on what's being said, what's the guidance that's being given. So again, if you have that ethylene oxide in your department, you really need to double check what ST58 is saying about it so that you are aligned with the new standard versus the old document for any changes that came through that. But another update isn't so much the guidance that has been put forth, but the way it's presented. So the previous ST58 was more recommended practice. This is very solidly a standard that we should take just as seriously as we take, ST79, our unofficial Bible of sterile processing. Um, this is like a co-book here, because if you have any high level disinfection chemical sterilization, you need to know this. It's not the same as steam sterilization, and there are a lot of nuanced details when you're handling these chemicals that you should be aware of. Any thoughts or questions or should I just keep word vomiting?
No, Vanessa, that's super. I mean, I think that one thing that people might be interested in as you sort of continue your walkthrough of some of these changes is understanding, putting this stuff in context as well, that technology is changing so much over the last, I mean, even the last 10 years, but think about the last 20, 30 years, what you did, you mentioned ethylene oxide, ST41, that's now been retired and absorbed into ST58.
Mm-hmm.
Um, ETO is still out there, but it's pretty rare these days. And in a lot of ways, I like to say that, ST58 is sort of helping us catch up with what we're doing today. And so I think it's a great point to lead off with that, Vanessa.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's funny as when I started in sterile processing, we did utilize ethylene oxide,
Hmm,
and the amount of care and attention to detail that went into handling it and monitoring it, and
sure.
any little thing that went wrong, it was like, nope, nope, we can't use it. We have to
Hmm.
redo
Yeah.
everything. We have to aerate for, half a day. Um, we took
Yeah.
it very, very, very seriously. And that's one of the things that I think we need to do justice with hydrogen peroxide
Hmm.
Yes.
sterilization as well.
Yeah, great point. Tia, any thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I can use me as an example about
Sure, please.
mishandling the cartridges that go inside of your Sterad or your low temperatures. I was a young tech. I was about 21, 22 years old, doing the routine of going through, putting my cartridge in, pulling it out, but I didn't have on gloves, didn't have on eye protection. So I'm in there handling it, pull it out. Somehow it pops.
Hmm.
And I was holding it and it was on the back of my hand. And I still have the little scar on the back of my hand to remind you that this is not your regular run of the mill, get it out of Target, Walmart, peroxide.
Sure.
This is industrial strength stuff, people. So we really want to like hammer home the emphasis of this stuff is extremely important, but it is also dangerous.
Hmm.
And that if you don't pay attention to it, you can wind up harming yourself. Now, mine was a small little
Hmm.
nick cut, but I get to use it as an example now at 40, being like, hey, this is what happens when you don't follow the rules.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, Tia. And I mean, you're spot on. I mean, we have talked about the differences between what's going on inside that low temperature sterilizer and what you
Hmm.
buy at the pharmacy. And I think you summed it up really well. And I think that this is going to sound super obvious, but I think sometimes to the train of thought earlier that when you're working around it every day, you don't necessarily think about it. What are we trying to do with chemical sterilants and high level disinfectants in the first place? We're
Hmm.
trying to kill the bugs. We're trying to kill the bad stuff. So it's not a big leap to say that if we're overexposed to that, that's not good for us. And
Yeah.
so we can get into the details of that later. But Tia, certainly appreciate you sharing that story. Um, and I think that that's actually a good segue, and we'll stick with you, Tia, for this next question. You've been focused on the gaps between policy and practice for a long time. You've really
Hmm.
kind of dedicated your career to this in the healthcare industry. Where do you see the biggest gaps between what the standard requires and what's actually happening in the field? And why do you think those gaps exist?
So the biggest gap that I see, and I see it on a consistent basis, is education. So it's a
Hmm,
lack of education where staff simply doesn't know. Like they'll know the surface level of this is what I was told, this is what I was shown. They
hmm,
don't really know the why. They just know this is what I'm supposed to do, but there is no why about why you're doing it. So
Hmm.
that's where I see like a huge disconnect. Even in my training, when I'm training new staff, I can go and get older staff and be like, hey, I want to go over with you like these cleaning products. They don't have a clue what it is.
Hmm.
They just know I'm supposed to put it in that bucket, leave it in there for a few minutes, put this thermometer in it, and put a lid on it. So those are the things where I see the huge gaps in the department. There's the lack of knowledge of what it is they're actually doing, what it is they're actually using, and the strength of it. So they don't really get like
Hmm.
the depth of how important what they're actually doing is, because we all know the age old moniker of glorified dishwashers or things of that
Yeah,
nature, but they have no idea that you are literally down here as like a little chemist.
no doubt.
It's like if you really want to get technical, you're like a little chemist out here where you're knowing how to mix, how to put things together, knowing which things can go together and which can't because of exposure you may get that you may not even feel right then, but it comes on the back end. So those are the things that I feel like in the field that I've seen for myself. It's the lack of education where you might get that initial, but there's no follow up and there's no
Hmm.
continued education. So they might know something from 3 years ago. Like a
Hmm.
great example would be Da Vinci arms, where for years it was you let them soak for an hour. Then it goes all the way down to you can do it in 15 minutes. But there are
Hmm.
a lot of places that don't know that because the education, there's that gap of it making it to the department when it comes out.
Yeah, I love the understanding the why piece, Tia, because the like you said, we're all little chemists down here.
Yeah,
I
you are.
love
You're a little
that.
chemist.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, of course, we're not all going to understand the intricate chemistries of how everything works. I mean, that's not the expectation, but understanding the why we do what we do,
Hmm.
and why the safety considerations are important, why the right chemistries with the right technology at the right time is
Yeah.
important. That's such a good point, and I think that from an education and training standpoint, that's something that we could all do better,
Hmm.
to drive towards the why, because that's going to help people understand why we're doing the education in the first place, right?
Yeah,
So
that's literally it. That's been the basis of my education and training over the years in the field of being like, I need you to understand why you're doing it, not
yeah,
just you're doing it because you were told.
right. Yeah, because we've always done it that way isn't a good answer,
Yeah,
right?
and that's everyone's favorite answer. We've
Yeah,
always done it that way.
that's right. That's right.
Where's that
Well,
in the book?
yeah, and the times they are changing, that's for sure. Let's let's go back to Jameed. Jameed, I want to get your input on this part of the conversation too. I mean, you spend a lot of time in sterile processing departments around the country. I think you probably win the competition for most frequent flyer miles of all of our panelists here. Um, because I want to put this into more context for the audience as well. When we talk about the education piece, the other elephant in the room is there's real world challenges that are going on as well, right? We're not operating in a vacuum. There's staffing constraints, there's turnover, there's competing priorities, there's workflow efficiency issues. Um, that all has an impact sometimes on compliance, unfortunately. And what do you think some of the biggest considerations there are to make when we're prioritizing standards compliance while juggling all these other priorities and challenges that are inevitably going to come up in a busy department?
That's a great question, Alex. And think about what's going on right now in our world with the Olympics, right? And what they have is practice, which is Tia's realm, the education, the reps. They do it over and over
Mm,
again. If you look at the average competency that you'll find in our departments, you have this much sterilization, steam sterilization, and then this little tiny bit of chemical disinfection of all kinds. And the fact is, from an SDS perspective, all of them typically have to go through a manual preparation uh, uh, process of some type, and then they come out on the clean side for us to do something with, right? Regardless of whether we're in an endo or whatever, we're taking that T probe, that same mentality of manually
mm,
prepare and then make the intervention, right? And so that's where the problem comes, Alex, is are we familiar with the SDS? It's
Mm,
with steam sterilization, which is the gold standard, which most of our stuff is one hazard. But when you're talking about
mm,
chemical disinfection, you're talking about multiple hazards. So when you get busy, when staffing is tight, that doesn't make the chemicals any safer, right?
mm,
The chemicals are still just as dangerous as if you were fully staffed. If your favorite person who does hydrogen peroxide sterilization every day is out on vacation. So you have to build in guardrails because whether you're busy or not busy, fully staffed or not fully staffed, these chemicals are dangerous. You pointed out earlier, these are not, we're going to chastise the microorganisms. We're going to yell at them. We're going to put them in timeout. These are lethal to all cells, right? So one of the things that we see is, Vanessa mentioned it early, a little bit of nonchalance. And part of it is
mm,
because the machines we use have gotten better and better. Those of you who are veterans like us, it used to be a lot of manual, you have
mhm,
to do this, you have to do that. As the chemicals have become more automated, we have become, we've had less guardrails. We rely on the machines, but if the machine doesn't work right, or if we do our steps out of order, now we're creating a hazard. So part of it is you train before the Olympics. You can't go, we can't show up to the Olympics and say, all right, we just had a big chemical spill, or we just had this big incident, we had this big exposure. Let's do this one really good in service at the beginning of the year. You have to train, you have to do reps, you have to make sure that everybody, so that when you have those tight times in staffing, you have some tight turnovers when you're trying to get the stuff back to your customers, that you're still following the same guardrails. What do you have in place to make sure
mm,
that we say, whoa, 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 we didn't do this, so we can't move to this step? And so, do you have that built in your instrument tracking system? Are you relying on, because if you rely on humans, the human factor, the best person, the Marks, the Michelle Romero's, to be the
mm,
best person doing it, then that's not, you don't have a policy in practice. You have a great personality. And so what you have to do is build those things in so that we're safe the whole time, and then make sure that we're proving that we're safe, right? Using other, because the machines are good, the competency is okay, the SOPs are good, but how do we prove that everybody is safe in the department? And that's kind of the important thing that ST58 kind of reminds us of.
Yeah, I love the analogy to training for the Olympics, right? And that's, one thing that comes to mind for me, Jameed, when you were talking there is that that's not just a 1 day a year kind of thing. And I think tying that to what Tia was saying earlier as well, that's part of your daily op tempo, right? That's something that's
Mhm.
discussed in the morning huddles. It's part of your regular training cycles.
Mhm.
For any of the panelists, any thoughts on the best ways to incorporate that into the day to day as opposed to just hey, we're going to have an education day once a month or once a quarter?
I think for me, what I've learned with like continuing education, if you try to sprinkle a little bit of it in daily, that
Mm,
tends to stick a bit more. So at the huddles, there was something that that was a tool that Jameet gave me actually when I
mm,
was working an assignment. He was like, "How about you try taking like little pieces of education and giving that out at the huddles? That way, it's continued, it's every day, and it's consistent." And then that way, at the end of the week, what I would do is I would gather them and I'd be like, "Okay, on Monday we discussed this. Can anybody explain to me what
mm,
this chemical is that we've implemented into the department?" And if they don't know, then I know you didn't read what I gave you. So
mm,
now we're going to go in the back and do an in service. So then we'd all march over to the back and do an
mm.
in service on the one that I asked you about, but you didn't read it. So now everybody's going to get to go over it. So those kinds of like little fun, lighthearted, punitive games, but they still drive home the purpose of yes,
Sure.
you're here working, but this is not a normal. And like I like to tell staff, this is not a normal 9 to 5. You are literally dealing with things that go inside of people's bodies. This is a
Hmm.
different one. This is not Old Navy. We're not folding shirts. Like we're literally doing things that can cause like harm. So you have to be very cognizant of that. So in the huddles, also with continued education, with doing repeats. So coming back and reteaching something or having them teach it to me. So like the see one, do one, teach one. So it's
Yes.
like I want to see, I'm going to teach you how to do it. I want to see you do it, and then I want you to be able to teach somebody else. So that's kind of like the method that I use when I'm doing any sort of training, like live in the department of trying
Yeah,
to implement.
yeah, that's great. The end of the week huddle where you gave them the answers to the test on Monday, I think is that's definitely a tool.
I give you an
Uh,
answer every day.
That's right. Yeah, every day. No, I think that's awesome. I think that's really good advice, and I think that the C1 D1 or C1 T1 D1. I mean, that's great as well. I mean, I think that's something that people, easy to say, hard to do, but you've got to
Yeah,
make that part of your daily compliance
it's a
approach.
muscle. It's a
Yeah,
muscle you have to work every day.
absolutely. Um, let's shift a little bit here. This next one's for Vanessa. Because we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to hit it head on. Of course, let's talk about overexposure to those chemicals in the department. That are used in low temperature sterilization and high level disinfection. Um, this is something that I think for those of you that have joined us, you may already know, but the standard focuses on this in a significant way, certainly much more significant than the 2013 version did. There's new annexes specifically focused on hydrogen peroxide and parasitic acid. We talked about ST41 has now been absorbed into ST58 for ethylene oxide. Um, I'm going to ask you a pointed question, Vanessa. Why should people care about this? And what are some of the strategies that departments can put into place to mitigate that potential exposure?
No, that's an excellent question. And as you were bringing it around, I thought of several scenarios. One is that I have a friend who was exposed to spilled, I think it was parasitic acid,
Mm,
and she ended up getting very, very sick and had to go to the hospital. It really affected her lungs for an extended period of time.
mm,
And I asked her, I was like, why, how did this happen? Like, how did this really come about? And her response was, well, nobody else was cleaning it up. And I'm like,
mm,
I feel like there should be a process and a policy and something in place, whether it's just having those appropriate spill kits in your department and then
mm,
training your staff how to use them. Not just, hey, there's a bucket, I don't know what's in it, or they know what's in it and they don't know what to do with it. Down to calling, if you have a safety department in your hospital who can help
mm,
with things like that is really how you can best take care of your staff. I know when I was working at my last place, that was an annual training that I did with them every year. We
mm,
we had the safety lady come in and she opened up the different spill kits. I rented a whole conference room so she could spread them all out on the floor and explain what every single thing did, so that anytime anything happened, and we had one of our AERs leaked,
mm,
and they knew what to do. They knew what to do with the bucket, and it got cleaned up really quick, and it got handled and addressed. Um,
mm,
but at the same time, we don't always know chemicals are spilled,
mm.
and
Well,
that's where I think, kind of tying into not only the standard but ChemDAQ is how do you know? How do you know that you're
yeah,
exposed, other than if you start feeling sick? And let's be real, sometimes decon is hot enough that it can make you nauseous and dizzy. So it might just be the heat, but it might also be chemical exposure. And you don't know what you don't know. So if you're not testing for it and monitoring and keeping an eye on your environment, you could be putting yourself and your staff at risk.
yeah. Hey, no, that's a great points, Vanessa. Couple of thoughts, but Jameed, Tia, anything to add to that?
No, I love when Vanessa talks like that, and it's
Yeah,
really just thinking about the overall responsibility that we have, not just as leaders or educators, but as citizens of the world, right? Like the
mm,
moral obligation that we have to protect everybody that's risking their health to serve the patient. So we have to help mitigate that risk. And like Vanessa said, it's not
mm,
a one person responsibility. There's a lot of great conversations going on in the chat, and it's
yeah,
really like The educator is not there just to show you what to do. It's let's make sure that we turn everybody into like a junior safety officer. Hey, 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 remember, we don't do that. Hey, you don't have on your gloves. Hey, we don't have. So those are the kind of things that kind of helps that department, not just performance wise, but you can go home and go to sleep knowing I'm doing everything to make sure that my team is safe. And my team can be whether I'm a tech or whether I'm the director or VP. So
Yeah, well said, Jimmy. Tia, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that would run the same lines. I think I agree with Jamita and Vanessa on this one.
Yeah. No, well, and I think, Vanessa, one thing that you said that definitely stood out to me as well about you don't know if you don't know. And
Yeah.
that's that, hydrogen peroxide doesn't have an odor at
Mhm.
low levels. And so if there were to be an acute or chronic exposure below the odor threshold of around 7 ppm is where you start to perceive some of that irritation, parts per million, I should say. Um, you don't know if it's there, right? When you're opening that door, if there's any residual, you don't know if you're not monitoring and testing on a regular basis. So that's something, of course, that we encourage folks to do and to look into, and a conversation we'd be more than willing to have. Parasitic acid, I talk about all the time. It's got the opposite problem. You definitely can smell it, super
Smell it.
irritating, super pungent. But I always say that our noses are not calibrated in parts per million, and it's hard to know if that irritation or that smell that you're getting is above or below what's generally considered safe by OSHA and ACGIH and EPA and others. And so I think that those are all great points. I mean, the standard ST58 specifically calls out that odor concern or lack thereof, depending on the chemical that you're working with, as something to take very seriously. So I'm glad that we're able to talk about that in this forum. I'm being mindful of the time here as well. Things are going quick as I knew they would, so I want to get to kind of the last round of questions here because there's so much goodness to get into. And Tia, I want to stick with you for a minute. And I want to talk about success stories. There's a lot of,
Hmm.
when we talk about standards, sometimes there's a lot of like, fist pounding of you've got to follow these standards. And
Yeah.
um, but let's bring up the positivity here a little bit. That the departments that are out there that are all over it, that are like, oh yeah, ST58 that was updated in 2024, we had that in 2023, right? What are they
Yeah.
doing that sets them apart from other departments, and how can folks that are on this call learn from that?
So the thing that I've noticed and feel for me personally is the departments that tend to be successful are the ones that I've seen in my years that were super successful were the ones that were heavy in documentation of said processes.
Mm,
So they kept records of everything, meaning if they had an in-service, you could vouch back to that in-service for whatever chemicals were brought into the department. That way, all staff was trained. Everybody knew what it was they had, and everybody knew how powerful the things that they were dealing with. So the education portion, I keep harping on it because that's literally the biggest tool that we have in spreading like information and the right
mm,
kind of information is pointing them in the direction of if you follow these guidelines, this is best practice. So if
mm,
they're going by ST58 and then they're using the IFU and you're comparing those two things together as an educator, you're pretty much Fort Knoxing yourself where you're fortifying
mm,
your department. Where if Joint Commission walks in, you're not only doing best practice, you're doing above. That was
mm,
the way I've always been trained with, Jameed and Lavonda and Luane and all the years that I've known them. It's always been best practice or above. So those are the
mm,
things that in some departments that I've been to, I remember I worked at one out in, I think it was Nebraska, I believe, and they just kept really good documents on certain areas of the things that they did. And so when they did have an issue, I was able to pinpoint it, go right back to it, figure out what the issue was, and then we were able to figure out, oh, this is what we needed to do. And so
mm.
that kind of stuff makes things easier when you're trying to implement, when you're trying to teach. You have the record of this is how we did this is when we trained on it, and these are the records for that. And so that if anything gets added to it, you're just adding to basically like a dossier. You're just adding more to the folder, adding more to the repertoire of this is the education that we implement in our department. This is the protocol that we follow. This is how quick we keep it. So that's the thing that I think
Hmm.
helps a lot with management in a department is keeping it organized and keeping it in order. And the departments that have been most
Yeah.
successful did that.
Yeah, documentation is so huge. It's a little thing, but it's a big thing. I think I
Huge.
saw Jamid and Vanessa both perk up when you were talking about that. It's such a great thing to do, but for some reason it can be hard to do it unless you make it part of that daily rhythm, like you've been
I
talking
have
about.
gotten caught slipping on it. Yes, I have.
No, I think it's great. Vanessa and Jamid, anything you want to add to that? Or, I mean, I think Tia covered it well, but any points you'd like to make there on documentation or any success stories that you wanted to share about departments that are really killing it?
Just really quickly, um, the new ST58 is not stricter. Is
Hmm.
just exposing what we weren't doing,
Hmm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's not about that. It's really the departments that get it right are the departments that it's not like go out and buy a bunch of stuff tomorrow. It's
Sure.
really like starting that journey of assessing what we're doing and seeing
Mhm.
honestly where we are and how do we get there. And
Hmm.
so that's really it. That's really how you get to that point. And that's what we're seeing in departments that are killing it. There's no department that Vanessa T and I couldn't find a finding on. But there's
Yeah,
several departments that are on that progress that they just have an opportunity for improvement instead of a compliance danger. And so
sure.
that's really what Tia starts was talking about is aiming for that best practice. So the departments that aim for best practice are a lot more successful than let's aim for minimum compliance.
Yeah.
True.
No, that's well said. And I think I want to stick with you, Jamid, because this is a fun one. You talk about where we are today. I want to talk about where we're going, because I think that this is something that I know you think about a lot. You and I have talked about a lot. Where do you see the industry going in terms of standards and technology for sterilization and high level disinfection? What's maybe a famous Jamid prediction for where things are going? Mindful, we are recording this session, so we'll have it forever, Jamid. But I'm curious what you see because again, you're in so many departments, you talk to so many people, you're so well connected. Where do you think things are going, and how can we anticipate that and be ready for that?
So what I'm seeing is the group that's coming in at SPD are a lot more informed, a lot more AI and tech savvy
Mm,
than we were. And so they ask a lot of questions. And sometimes there's frustration because we can't answer those questions. And that's on us, right? And I think that taking that from the new people coming in and expanding it to the people that are surveying departments, right? There is going to be imperative. When we talk about surveyor preference and objecting to findings, here's one thing you can't object to is safety. Safety
mm,
is black and white. What are you doing to prove that you're keeping the people safe using these dangerous chemicals, right? What are you doing to prove that these people can have access to the SDS, that they know what they're working with? So if you don't have documented this, you don't say this area is safe, then you may find yourself in trouble. So I think
mm,
AI's ability to help surveyors survey better and the new employees to be more knowledgeable and ask more pointed questions is going to be a part of that future, right? And hopefully AI
mm.
can help add some guardrails to what we are doing, right? So that we'll be less reliant on what somebody said or our own interpretation of the IFU or our interpretation of standards like ST58. So I think that's where it's going, that AI is going to be a big part of our practice. And what we're going to find out is we know AI is not perfect, right?
Mm.
No, AI can make some mistakes. So there's going to be a need to be able to leverage that and that technology so that we can prove that everybody is safe and we're doing it correctly. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that as technology just rapidly improves,
Yeah.
we've got to embrace it. Use it as a tool, not a threat. I think that's something that the world is talking about a lot, but in particular with this particular industry in sterile processing departments. When I think about AI and its role in sterile processing, I think about data as well, and using the data that we can get about everything in the department, from instrument tracking to machine performance, you name it. That's going to help us get better, faster, stronger in what you all do. I know that Vanessa, I know you're very data driven and focused on those types of outcomes. I mean, the Joint Commission came up earlier, and actually I'll tie it to something that Jameed just said about ST58. A lot of people saw the news about the revised and streamlined Joint Commission standards. That doesn't mean less strict. It just means more focused, right?
Hmm.
And data-driven outcomes is a big piece of that. Vanessa, what do you think about this? How do you think that departments can better leverage data to support ST58 compliance and staff safety in that regard?
Yeah, I was thinking of that actually while Tia was talking about documenting. So I was in nursing for like 5 years before falling in love with sterile processing, and it was hammered home. If it wasn't documented, it wasn't done.
It
So
happens.
if
Yeah.
you can't prove that your hydrogen peroxide sterilizer went through the whole process, if you don't have that proof that you can put in front of, the Joint Commission or whomsoever,
Mm,
you're just telling them something to tell them something. And so I know a lot of the conversations that I'm seeing either through the internet or with just personal conversations is adding more scans with the tracking system and doing and like really
mm,
making this data collection a little more firm. But people also on the flip side are starting to feel like it's almost impeding on their workflow process.
mm.
How many places do I have to scan one tray in decon to prove that I cleaned it in decon? Um,
Hmm.
and that's a conversation
Yeah.
for, each department has, we all have our own workflows, even though we follow the same process, essentially. It's different for everybody. And being able to look at those Joint Commission standards and look at these AAMI standards and saying, okay, we marry them up, we find where they overlap or where we really need to hit things. What can we do in our workflow process if it comes to us and um, we yeah,
Good.
sorry. Lost my train
So far, so good.
um
Don't take the day.
lost my train of thought. But
Somebody's unmuted.
yeah, I think we took care of it.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But essentially, I know me personally, when we had surveyors come in and they asked for something, being able to just be like, yeah, here it is. Here you go. Here's what you
Mm,
want. Next
Yep.
question. It makes
yeah.
the whole time frame so nice. Especially if
Yeah.
you're doing something like above and beyond. Tia brought up best practice, and one thing that we've come across when we've gone to different facilities is part of the monitoring that you do when you are sterilizing in your hydrogen peroxide is I know it's not required to do it necessarily every load, but how can you prove that every load really did, your BI really passed? If you
Mm,
do it at the beginning of the day and then you run a whole bunch of stuff, and then the next day that one fails.
Yep.
It's a quick
yeah.
process. There isn't really a cool down time. All that stuff could have been used the day prior, and you don't
Sure.
know. There's no guarantee. And I've been part of, the down the rabbit trail of patient has an infection and they go through every little thing that you possibly could,
Every
Mm.
detail.
Oh yeah.
every tiny detail. So if you can't say we absolutely did it, you're leaving yourself open for, a headache and legally.
Sure.
And I know it may not feel like it goes with chemicals, but it does.
It does.
Documentation and chemicals are
Oh
hand in
sure.
hand.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I can't believe we're at 46 minutes here. We're gonna have to start wrapping up. For the audience, we will continue to be having these conversations. Of course, I know it's a popular topic and people want to have these direct discussions about it. And in that spirit, one of the things that was important to this group, and so as Tia and Vanessa and Jameed and myself and our teams who have been excellent. Shout out to Monique and Pam and the rest of the team. One of the things that's important to this group is that we make this actionable. We don't just want to have the four of us here talking about theory and standards, and you leave this and you say, well, what the heck do I actually do to try to make a positive influence and change in my department? So we wanted to do this game here at the end, just briefly, that I like to call "What One Thing." And so we're going to give each of our panelists just a 30 seconds to a minute. If you could say one thing to the folks that have joined us today that they can take back to their department and act on quickly, what would that one thing be? So Jameed, I'll put you on the spot and have you start, and then we'll go to Vanessa and Tia.
My one thing would be, can you go and figure out what the exposure level? Because it's not zero. It's never zero. Don't be fooled. And so, and I love peracetic acid. It's my favorite one, even over hydrogen peroxide. But every single time you're using these chemical sterilization or disinfection solutions, that it doesn't go to the magic land. So the first one, the first thing is, how can we ensure that? And there's a bunch of ways, and they don't cost $1 million, but start digging down to that part of ST58 and start talking about what's the limit for exposure, and then answer the question, are we above or below it? And how can you tell? So that would be my one thing to take back from ST58 and this talk.
Thanks, Shamid. Yeah, great point. Because once you know, then you can do something about it, right? That's really knowledge is power. That's something that we talk about quite a bit. Vanessa, what do you think? What's your one thing?
My one thing, again, kind of piggybacks off what you guys were saying is if you don't know, you don't know. So read the standard. I mean, this panel is great, but let's be real, we did not do a deep dive.
No.
Look at the standard and look at your process. Are there areas where you could make adjustments for the safety of your staff? Do you have that monitoring system in place? If you have ethylene oxide, have you done the little badge that they wear for the day?
Yeah, the little
Exposed to. There's little things that you can do and pick up out of the standard. You don't have to overhaul your whole department in a day, but just find those little things in your process that you can start tweaking.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. Tia, what's your one thing?
My one thing is education is your greatest defense and your best offense. Because if you know what you're doing or you're educated about it, you're not scared to do it. So that would be the thing that I give people to take with them into their department, because I was one of those ones that was scared because I didn't know. And once I got education, I realized I was only afraid because I didn't know what I was doing. So I would say my power hour thing is education is literally your greatest weapon in sterile processing. So with ST58, read about it, learn it. I promise you, it may not be like cover to cover reading Harry Potter, but I guarantee it'll keep you out of court.
Fair enough. I just jotted down, Tia. I was only afraid because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't
have a clue.
That's a great quote. And I have been taking notes throughout this discussion over here. Go ahead, Jameed.
No, Tia is very honest, and that's a very honest assessment of where a lot of us are. Nobody knows all the stuff that has to do with chemical sterilization and HLD, and stop pretending like you do and start, tapping into some research.
Yeah, and you don't have to. In fact, one of the things that the standard says is essentially it takes a village, right? I'm paraphrasing, of course. The standard doesn't say it word for word like that, but it says you should talk to the consultants, the sterilizer manufacturers, the AER manufacturers, the monitoring companies, the educators. It says that you should work with all of those people to get their inputs to develop your compliance strategy for the standard. I've said this a lot. I'll say it again. We are all on the same team when it comes to effective use of chemical sterilants and high-level disinfectants in the department. That's something that this team here of panelists certainly agrees with and is completely on board with. And I want to take the opportunity just to say thank you again to the panelists and the teams. For the folks on the meeting. What you see is what you get with these three. They really care about this. I'm going to brag on them for a second, but there's a reason that they all do what they do, and it's because they care about each of you. And we're not here talking about compliance for the sake of compliance. We're talking about keeping you safe and doing what you do all day, every day, and we're grateful for that work. We will be reaching out to folks. Again, I said I was taking notes here. Maybe we'll even put something together with kind of the key takeaways from this discussion. But this is just the beginning. We're going to continue to have these conversations. Please reach out to us. Thank you for being an advocate for your teams and your departments. We hope that everybody has a great day. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you
Thanks for
again soon.
attending.
Hi, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you
Y'all
all.
have a good one.